The final tab you need to understand to use XRNA.js is the settings tab. It, of course, is home to a number of different settings, which the user can modify in order to configure the way in which XRNA.js operates. I'll go through each of these in order to explain what they do. The first is copy input file names to output file names, and this modifies the behavior on the input-output tab. When a user selects an input file, it has a file name, and that file name is auto-detected and auto-populated in this field here. Similarly, for the next setting, copy input file extensions to output file extensions puts the input file extension into this field whenever possible. However, it should be noted that not every input file extension is a supported output file extension, so this won't always take place even when the setting is on. Here I'll show you what this behavior does by default, and simply note that these two fields will change. So these become auto-populated. The idea of this is to allow the user to be able to make changes to the data in this scene and then download it in order to have a copy of their modified files without having to re-specify the name and the extension. Of course, this is a JavaScript app, so it's not capable of overwriting a file directly on your file system. If you want to replace a file, say you're trying to edit some of the values in that file, you're going to have to rename the files yourselves. Okay, so the next setting, reset viewport after file upload. This one is pretty straightforward. Basically, as we've explained, the reset function places all values within the 2D RNA structures into this window here in a nicely framed way so that there's nothing overhanging the sides. If you don't want that, say you're opening the same file multiple times, or you're wanting to reconfigure the same or similar files and you want to jump to this space, you can simply disable this setting and reopen your file. And just like that, you'll be placed in the exact same position in the scene, so you don't have to re-navigate to that exact same position. The next one is pretty straightforward, use degrees. There are some turning based or orientation based aspects to the edit tab, and so if you would rather use radians, you can simply disable this and you will be able to use radians in those fields directly. The next one, reposition nucleotides when formatting. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over a number of these. Reposition nucleotides when formatting is relevant to the base pair tab, or base pairs editing tab, also known as the format tab. This one, canonical base pair distance, is the distance along which canonical base pairs will be distanced from one another whenever that takes place, i.e. adding a new base pair or editing a pre-existing base pair to be canonical. Similarly, wobble and mismatch do the exact same things. Similarly, distance between contiguous base pairs is applied to helices, meaning that whenever there's a continuous run of base pairs, they will be distanced from one another in series, and so along the axis of the helix. So that's what this one does, and you can change this value here. Each of these fields expects a number. I guess I skipped one here, the format tab, base pairs editor type. The base pairs editor is normally table-based, but it can also be text-based if you want to use the old way in which XRNA.js is implemented. Finally, we have these last three, and you have the ability to replace nucleotides with the contour line. So each of these nucleotide symbols, as well as the label lines and label text, can all be replaced with a simple contour line. This is typically applied if you're going to create an image for the sake of publication, but for whatever purpose you might have for it, it exists. Also, if you're working at night and you don't want to strain your eyes, you can turn on to dark mode. Just a warning here, there's a bit of a flash, so this is the dark mode, and you can edit colors, and whenever you revert either to or from the dark mode, all of the colors that are applied will be inverted, so just keep that in mind if you're wanting to create a non-dark mode image, but you are operating in the dark mode. Once you turn it off, all the colors will be inverted. Turning it off now. Okay, the final one here is disable the navigate away prompt. Whenever you go to close the application, such as this, you'll get a warning here that asks whether or not you want to save your work before you leave. I imagine that this might be annoying to some users, therefore I added the ability to turn this off. So if you then click, it will close without warning, and any of your progress will be lost. So, XRNA.js does not use cookies. And instead of cookies, I implemented the ability for you to download and then upload your settings. So let's say we want to change a few of these settings somewhat at random, but we want to see these applied once we reopen XRNA.js. we will download our settings. So that creates an XRNA settings.json object. You can then refresh the page just to demonstrate the functionality. You go ahead and upload that same settings file, and our settings are retained. So the contour line in specific demonstrates that we have retained our settings. This has been the XRNA.js settings tab.